All right, boys and girls. So, as you know, today we continue our history of computers, and today's where things start to get really exciting because we start talking about two computer giants who you may or may not recognize in this photo.
No.
Take a good look. These two men and the people who worked with them shaped the way that computers are today. This is Steve Wozniak over here and Steve Jobs. And anybody who works, yep, Steve, the names might sound familiar. Now, what I think you'll find interesting is that Steve Jobs' name is much more recognizable, but without Steve Wozniak, none of this would have happened. So it's kind of like they were two partners and they worked very closely together. But one was all about the style and the creative part, and one was kind of all about how to make that work. You needed both of them. We are going to watch a video, and it is literally the fastest talking video I've ever heard. I'm going to be pausing it, but you're going to have to, now, you people talk very fast, so you'll probably be able to catch a lot of it, but this 5-minute video that goes at the speed of light gives you a lot of information. So here we go.
As its stock hit the $200 mark, Apple became the first $1 trillion US company in history. Welcome to our animated show of history. This episode presents to you the history of the world's first trillion-dollar company. Apple was founded by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in April 1976. Steve and Paul...
Okay, so Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak founded the company together. A lot of people think that it was just Steve Jobs. It wasn't. So there's Steve Jobs as a baby.
Jobs was born to Abdul Fattah Jamdali and Joanne Schiebel on February 24, 1955 in San Francisco, but then was adopted by Paul Jobs and $1 Company.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Paul Jobs was born to Abdul Fattah Jamdali and Joanne Schiebel on February 24, 1955 in San Francisco, but then was adopted by Paul Jobs and Claire Hagopian, a Bay Area blue-collar couple whom Jobs is extremely grateful to and always considers as his parents 1,000%. By the time he was 10, Jobs was deeply involved.
So by the time he was 10 years old, he was deeply involved with electronics. So he was adopted, obviously. His parents they lived in California, which is where the tech company is, Silicon Valley. We learned about that with Hewlett and Packard. By the time he was 10, he was building things.
Involved in electronics and befriended many of the engineers in the neighborhood. While studying at Modeloma Elementary School in Mountain View, Jobs hardly made any friends and was frequently bullied that he considered dropping out of school.
What happened to that girl?
Steve Jobs did not get along with people. This was from the time he was a little boy. What?
My mother does not get along with people.
No, he didn't get along with anybody. This is a problem in life. If you are very, very smart, but you can't get along or work with anybody, why would that be a problem? Raise your hand.
If you won't have any friends or any partners.
Friends, so just social. Partners who will help you. That was Steve Jobs' issue from the time he was a little boy. He always wanted it his way. Now, he was very brilliant and he had great ideas, but you
can't force someone to do what you want.
And you can't just have it your way.
When he was 13, Jobs was given a summer job by Bill Hewlett. He then entered Homestead High School.
Summer job by who?
Bill Hewlett?
Hewlett and
Packard.
So where did Steve Jobs work?
With Hewlett.
Yes, so did he probably learn things there?
Yes.
In the 70s, what were they working on?
Computers.
No, not yet.
Calculators that
The
could
calculator that could fit in your pocket. Okay, so he gets a summer job. He's 13 years old, getting a summer job.
School with Bill Fernandez, a fellow electronics hobbyist. They decided to enroll in John McCollum's Electronics 1. McCollum and the rebellious Jobs would eventually clash, and Jobs began to lose interest in the class. Jobs and Steve Wozniak were introduced in 1971 by...
Okay, so he didn't get along with the people at Hewlett and Packard, right?
Right.
He tried to take a class with a friend. It didn't work out. So here's Steve Jobs. here's Steve Wozniak. Now, what kind of person will it take to be friends with Steve Jobs?
A
Very agreeable man.
That's a really great way to put it. A very agreeable person. A very
Like,
laid
sure.
back, chill, yes. And Celia, what'd you say?
So-
Understanding,
I said very nice.
nice, patient,
Another person who doesn't let
right.
makes things.
Because if both people were like fighters,
Same thing.
it wouldn't work.
A mutual friend. The two Steves got along thanks to their shared love of technology. The two Steves attended the Homebrew Computer Club together, a computer hobbyist group in California's Menlo Park. Woz produced the first computer with a typewriter-like keyboard, and thanks to you,
Oh, shoot.
Oh,
When they say Woz, they're talking about Steve Wozniak. That's his nickname. So they're at the Homebrew Computer. Steve Wozniak invents the first computer, used a typewriter, and found a way to connect it to a TV screen. This is really the first computer that looks anything like the computers we use now. But who invented it?
Him
Woz, right? Not Jobs.
was
So-
Jobs.
Even though Steve Jobs was the face of Apple, who was the person doing the inventing?
Wow.
Wozniak.
later christened the Apple I, which was the archetype of every modern computer. Jobs saw Woz's computer, recognized its brilliance, and sold his VW microbus to help fund
He
its
has a
production.
phone.
Wozniak
No.
sold his HP
He has a
What did he have?
A calculator.
He sold his HP computer. Wozniak was the one at HP who invented that computer.
The car.
Before all this happened. That's a car, yeah. So they sold like their prized possessions, their car and his computer that he helped invent, to make a company. What's the company going to be called?
Apple.
calculator, and together they founded Apple Computer Inc. on the 1st of April, 1976,
It's made out of
alongside
cardboard.
Ronald Wayne. Jobs-
Okay, this guy, Ronald Wayne, he makes maybe the dumbest business decision of his life. Are you ready to hear it?
Yeah.
This guy must be kicking himself.
convinced him to take 10% of the company's stock and act as an
So, no, they said to him, hey, instead of us paying you, we'll give you 10% of Apple computers. 10%.
Oh.
That means for every $10 that Apple makes, you get $1. Now, how much is Apple computers worth?
$1 billion.
Billions and billions and billions. So how much would that guy have made?
$1.
$5.
$5.
Like maybe. Wait,
Oh,
billion?
that's the
Wait,
billion?
are we at a million?
Millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. But watch what he does. He gets mad and does. Watch what he does.
arbiter should he and Woz come to blows. But Wayne backed out 12 days later, selling for just $500.
He sold it for $500. 10% of Apple. Watch what happens. $500.
They got one.
4 years later, this is what it would have been worth.
A holding that would have been worth $72 billion 40 years later. Apple's
40?
very first logo was drawn
40?
by Ronald Wayne.
He sold it for $500. 40 years later, where we are now, would have been worth billions. He's a buffoon. Okay, the first Apple logo. Do you know the story of Isaac Newton, who discovered gravity? He was sitting under an apple tree,
Yeah,
and an apple
yeah,
falls on his
yeah.
head. He says, "Eureka!" Okay, so that was the first logo. It was Sir Isaac Newton. So that's how the apple became, because that was like the idea. Get it? The apple.
Oh,
Yeah, but then they
I
changed
see.
it.
I
to the
don't
After
really
that,
know.
the
Okay, so that logo's kind of like old-fashioned.
Yeah.
So they changed it, but the way Apple came was from Sir Isaac Newton's. The apple fell and hit him in the head.
logo was designed again with a rainbow scheme. It was used for 22 years until Steve Jobs had asserted the Apple logo after he returned from Apple.
Oh, the rainbow one looks
A year
cool.
after foundation, the Apple II was released.
Wait, listen.
It was a much more commercial product and came with its own case. It had a MOS technology processor running at just 1 megahertz with 4 kilobytes of RAM, and was one of the 3 1977 Trinity computers generally credited with creating the home computer market. The Apple III was designed to take on the business environment that was released on May 1980. Because of lacking the cooling fan as Jobs wished to, the company had to recall thousands of Apple III. On December 12, 1980, Apple launched the IPO of its stock. It instantly created more millionaires, about 300, than any company in history. The Apple I, II, and
Okay, so that's the first one, typewriter with a TV screen. I think you get the idea. That's the next one that comes out.
3 computers were text-based machines, much like the earliest IBM PCs. But Jobs wanted something more intuitive. So the Lisa launched in
Okay, Steve Jobs had a daughter named Lisa. Steve Jobs was very obsessed with work and did not spend a lot of time with his daughter and feels a lot of guilt about it. But he did name this computer after her. This computer never really took off. It never really became very popular. But he considered it a great work of technological art.
That's so sad.
Yeah, it is sad.
1983, with its graphical user interface in place, the Macintosh debuted.
Okay, the Macintosh coming up is when it really took off. So the Lisa was kind of left in the dust. So here's the Macintosh.
The following year, Jobs was forced out of Apple in 1985.
So, Jobs, once again, his temper forced the people he worked with at Apple, he didn't get along with. So he was forced out. It was kind of like, you go nicely or we're going to fire you. So he left and he started a whole new company. And by the way, he and Wozniak were in a huge fight at this time.
Android, please tell me that
After
you
a long power struggle with the company's board and its then CEO, John Sculley, Jobs then took a few of Apple's members with him to found Next, that specialized in computers for higher education and business markets. Apple purchased Steve Jobs' company.
So Steve Jobs gets kicked out of Apple, creates Next. Apple is still worth a lot more money, so what does Apple do to get back at him? They buy Next and make him come back and work for them.
Why would you do that?
Why would you do that?
Because they're mixed. Let's say you and I are in a fight, we're in a business, you're nasty and rude to everybody, as always. You leave the business. We say, okay, listen, Haley, you gotta go, all right? You can quit or you're gonna get fired. You don't get along with anybody. You go and you create your own business. But I start to realize, you know what? Yeah, Haley might be a little hothead, but she's a genius and I need her.
Does Next still exist?
And I say, Haley, will you come back and work for me? And you say no.
No.
So I say, you know what? You're gonna come back and work for me because I'm gonna buy your company and now you're my employee.
Does Next
Oh
still
my
exist?
Wow.
Not really.
In Next, in 1996,
Wait,
this
is
will
he the
not only
owner?
bring Steve Jobs
What?
Is he the owner?
You and Haley starts her own company. I realize that I still need her.
Haley mocked
That
me.
even though she's a diva, even though she fights with everybody, she's a genius. I say, come back and work for me. She says no,
No.
and I say,
That's
you're
it.
gonna come back and work for me because I'm gonna buy your company, and now you work because I have a lot more money.
No, it's her business.
Yes,
so why
but
are you buying it?
Because her business, it can't just be her. It has to have a board of directors.
Yeah.
So I offer them enough money that they're like, well, we don't, whatever, go ahead, buy it.
Whatever. Oh, do your thing,
Jobs back to
girl.
Apple's management, but Next technology would become the foundation of the Mac OS X operating system.
Okay, so you asked if Next really exists. I didn't want to answer that yet. Next does exist, but it's in the operating system of how Apple computers works.
In 1997, Jobs stepped in as the CEO to begin a critical restructuring of the company.
So then they kind of made up, and he starts working for Apple again. And this is when his creativity really starts to shine.
At the 1997 Mac World Expo, Steve Jobs announced that Apple would be entering into a
Why did
partnership
they
with
blur out the
Microsoft.
face?
Included in this was a 5-year commitment from Microsoft to release Microsoft Office for Macintosh, as well as a $150 million US.
All right, so
Where's Bill Gates?
Microsoft obviously was Bill Gates, different person. Steve Jobs didn't like Bill Gates. Steve Jobs doesn't like anybody.
Bill Gates sounds so familiar.
We're gonna learn
He's
about Bill Gates
the
next.
richest person in the world.
All right, so kind of. So they agreed to kind of work together.
For investment in Apple. While discontinuing Apple's licensing of its operating system to third-party computer manufacturers, one of Jobs' first moves was to develop the iMac, a family of all-in-one Macintosh desktop computers. In 1998, the first iMac was released. At that time, Apple had suffered a series of setbacks as consumers increasingly opted for Wintel, Windows PCs, machines instead of Apple's Performa models. The iPod was released in late 2001.
All right. So this is when Steve Jobs really and you see how they have him constantly back. His signature thing was that he wore a black turtleneck all the time. So by the way, if you're looking for a very, very easy Halloween costume, black turtleneck, say you're Steve Jobs.
We don't need to
The
have
iPod line came from Apple's digital hub category, when the company began creating software for the growing market of personal digital devices. 3 years later, the iTunes Music Store was launched, with 2 million downloads in the first 16 days. The first
What?
version
That's
of the
a lot
iPod
of
became
music.
publicly available on June 29, 2007 in selected countries. While it wasn't the first smartphone, it leapfrogged far beyond the competition and launched the mobile revolution. The MacBook Air, released in 2008, was the biggest change in Apple's laptop line for years, and invented a whole new category of computers called Ultrabooks. In August 2011, Jobs died of respiratory arrest related to the pancreatic neuroendocrine.
He had a very bad type of cancer, and he didn't agree with any of his doctors. Big surprise.
Wow.
And he wouldn't take the medicine.
He shouldn't be standing.
Well, it's a cartoon. He wouldn't take the medicine because he didn't agree with his doctor, because he doesn't get along with
People.
anybody. So,
Not even his parents?
No.
no.
He got adopted, remember?
No, but even his adopted parents he had to clash with.
Tumor. Apple then bought Beats, which made headphones and ran a music service for $3 billion in 2014.
Alright,
A
watch.
year later, Apple released Apple Watch. So far, Apple has released 11 generations of iPhone, along with several versions of iPad. The iPhone is one of the most widely used smartphones in the world, and its success has been credited with helping Apple become one of the world's most valuable publicly traded companies.
Yeah.
So, are you using an iPhone? Please tell us in the comments.
Okay.
It's like E-boy.
So that's the story of Steve Jobs. It's a very, very quick story. But we are going to do our next slide on Steve Jobs. So you're going to get logged into your computers, pull up your Google Classroom, and let's get to work. All right, we'll do questions at the end. Scoop.
I have a Samsung
Scoop
TV
now.
and an iPad, and I hope that Samsung does not get to use it.